If you're thinking, why am I comparing these two phones now, especially when the S25 is launching in just a month, well, you're not wrong. But honestly, I took so many photos in the last few trips, I didn't want to waste it, and I still want to see if a year-old S24 Ultra still gives the latest iPhone 16 Pro Max a stiff competition. Let's go. See, the iPhone 16 Pro Max has a 48 megapixel primary camera, while the S24 Ultra has a 200 megapixel camera with a slightly wider aperture, which should help more with the low light. But we know that megapixels aren't everything, and how well they're optimized is what really matters. So let's get into the samples. See, both these phones have very capable primary camera systems, and please note that all these photos were taken with both the phones in their standard default configuration, along with the photographic style set to standard on the iPhone. And if you look at the pictures, they're almost very similar with very minor differences. But then if you lean into it, you'll see that the S24 Ultra in some cases adds more punch and vibrance to its photos. Also, the S24 Ultra adds a bit of green, while the iPhone tends to add more magenta, making the reds and browns a little darker. But that's just how they're optimized, and this picture is a perfect example of that. Even here in the iPhone picture, you'll see that the orange chairs are a little darker and even slightly pinkish because of that magenta addition. Though I have to admit that the iPhone balances exposure better when, there's crazy harsh sunlight. I mean, just notice the reflections on the tables and chairs. In the iPhone picture, they're a little less harsh. But when it comes to HDR, I think the S24 Ultra does a solid. For example, this picture is an example of HDR done right. The S24 Ultra not only captured a more vibrant scene, but it's also lit better than the iPhone photo. And if you have to share one of these pictures straight off the bat, it would be the S24 Ultra. Even here, zoom in on the t-shirt that the iPhone captured, and you'll see that the shadows are a bit crushed, while the S24 Ultra retained it better. Then over here, the details and the colors captured on the rocks is so much better on the S24 Ultra than on the iPhone. And if you notice the grass now, it's a lot softer, while the texture on the S24 Ultra is a lot better. Overall, in daytime, the S24 Ultra pictures have a bit more vibrant and punchy look to them right out of the box, while the iPhone 16 Pro Max tends to take more natural photos. And while that is something that people do prefer, I just don't think it's social media ready or share worthy right out of the box, right? You have to edit them a little. Plus, the S24 Ultra's HDR performance is definitely better. And for these reasons, I'm going to give this one to the S24 Ultra. Okay, next comes low light, and for the most part, I found most of the pictures to be very similar. So I really had to dig in to find some differences or some pictures where I could really tell which one does a little better. For example, in here, again, very similar pictures, but the iPhone 16 Pro Max did take a slightly brighter picture than the S24 Ultra. But then in this one, the S24 Ultra is a little brighter than the iPhone 16 Pro Max. And so I felt really torn between the two and trying to find out which one was doing consistently better. Now, both phones handled lights and glowing signages quite well in the dark, but there were times I felt the iPhone 16 Pro Max did a better job, for example in here, because if you notice the lights in the S24 Ultra, there's a bit of a bloom around over there. But then in this picture, the S24 Ultra really handled the colors and the highlights really well. If you look at the blues and the yellows of L and O in the signage, well done. And so again, I was in a pickle because they kept beating each other. Then over here, some would prefer the natural dark look of the iPhone, while some, like here, would prefer the brighter look of the S24 Ultra. And so this one became more about preference. As I said, I literally had to handpick photos to bring out these differences, and they both equally competed with each other, and I think both of them deserved a point in this case. Next comes portrait photos, and here I felt there were some clear differences. So again, like before, the portrait photos from the S24 Ultra are more vibrant, while that from the iPhone 16 Pro Max are a bit more subtle and natural. However, let's look at this picture that is kind of difficult to get perfectly right portrait-wise, but the S24 Ultra has kept the picture more vibrant and sharper. I mean, still not perfect, but it does have more of the right areas into focus, while the iPhone 16 Pro Max kind of left the flower a little weirdly blurry. Even in this picture, in case of iPhone, everything in the background is equally blurred, like it's very abrupt, while you'll see in the S24 Ultra, it's progressively blurring out, which is very natural. Now, when the lighting is low, that's when I figured that the portrait photos of the S24 Ultra are a lot better. So here's a picture that I took in slightly dim condition, and even a 6-year-old will tell you that the S24 Ultra picture is clearly better. And then this picture is the final blow. I mean, just look at that photo taken by the S24 Ultra. The iPhone photo is just unusable. I mean, you're gonna have to edit this, increase the exposure or brightness, to get it to the S24 Ultra level. And so when it comes to portraits, I think the S24 Ultra is the clear winner. All right, now let's talk about selfies. See, both of them have a 12 megapixel front-facing camera, but the 16 Pro Max does have a larger aperture, which should help with low-light photos. But you know what? Let's look at the samples and decide. And for the most part, I think it boils down to personal preference. Like, the iPhone 16 Pro Max, it has that same flat, natural look, while the S24 Ultra has a more vibrant, punchy, high-contrast look. For example, in this picture, I prefer myself in the S24 Ultra because, of that color that it brings out in my shirt, and the skin tone has a bit more contrast to it too. Even in this picture, I like the even look on my face in the S24 Ultra photo and not so much the dark look that my right side has in the iPhone photo. And then this case is very interesting. So it's backlit, right? And the iPhone, it did try to bring in some details into the sky, but at the cost of darkening my face, which kind of ruins the purpose of a selfie. In the S24 Ultra, sure, the sky is overexposed, but then my face is well captured, it's bright, and that's what I would want from a selfie. In low light, the iPhone 16 Pro Max definitely did a better job. I mean, it's sharper, while the S24 Ultra is a bit softer. And again, the big reason is that it's got a bigger aperture, so it can capture more light, and that's what it did. However, portrait selfies are also important. And I think in this case, the S24 Ultra clearly killed it. I mean, the skin tones are better, the colors are better, and even the more natural background blur, which are all important aspects of a portrait selfie, the S24 Ultra has a clear advantage. Overall, in selfies, at least, I think the S24 Ultra does better in most cases. They're more vibrant, better, warmer skin tones, and it does better portraits for sure. The iPhone 16 Pro Max, it just does better in low light situations. And so I think for selfies, the S24 Ultra is definitely a more versatile camera. And so this one, again, goes to the S24 Ultra. Now, let's talk about the ultra-wide lens. This time around, you've got a bumped up 48 megapixel ultra-wide lens on the iPhone 16 Pro and a 12 megapixel on the S24 Ultra. And if you just look at the photos, they're even more similar than the similarity we saw in the pictures taken using the primary lens. The difference is barely there, and they are both really good. The only difference is that the iPhone 16 Pro Max can take 48 megapixel raw pictures, so it's got more detail and it can be, color corrected more aggressively in post. The S24 Ultra too can take 12 megapixel raw pictures, but then that's, limited to 12 megapixel. And just for that reason, I think the iPhone 16 Pro Max has a slight edge over the S24 Ultra. Okay, next is zoom. And look, the Ultra series from Samsung has held the title for the Zoom King for quite some time now. But with the S24 Ultra, they capped the optical zoom at 5x instead of 10x, and that brings it to the same level as the iPhone 16 Pro and Pro Max in terms of specs. So let's actually look at which one does it better. So this is 1x, and now let's go into 2x. And up until now, everything kind of looks good, but now the minute you go 5 times zoom, you'll see that the gate numbers are a tad bit sharper on the Samsung, while on the iPhone, there's some flaring of lights and blooming as well. And now let's go 10x. And you'd see that the iPhone picture has gotten very noisy, while the Samsung has relatively kept it sharp, despite 10x not being the optical zoom. Now let's take another example. So this is 1x, and then this is 2x, and they look pretty similar. Even at 5x, I really couldn't tell much of a difference between the two, but it's when you go into 10x, you'll see that the Samsung is just, it just retains more info, just looks better, while the iPhone is just unusable. I mean, the S24 Ultra, even at 10x, which is not the optical zoom, it does retain quite a lot of info. Forget that. I in fact went ahead to 20x, and even then, just look at what Samsung did. Although during daytime, the difference isn't much between 1x, 2x, 5x, and 10x on both the phones, but it's really during the difficult or challenging situations, in terms of light, the S24 Ultra really nails it. And when it comes to zoom, I think the S24 Ultra is again a clear winner. Okay, the next category is video capability. And most people blankly say that the iPhones are the best in videos. And I'm not denying that. They are. They take some really amazing video footage, especially in daylight. Really good. But like photos, videos too are taken in different situations, right? There's low light videos, there's portrait videos, there's selfie videos, there's action videos. So let's look at all of that. So in regular daylight, you'll be hard pressed to find the difference in the video quality. Both are extremely stable cameras. They take smooth, high quality footage. Outdoors too, very vibrant, natural looking videos. And again, barely any difference in here as well. Now in here, you will see that the S24 Ultra has more of a vibrant color tone, while the iPhone 16 Pro Max has more of a natural looking color tone. Now in this case, I personally prefer the natural tone because, most people, especially in case of videos, especially creators, prefer the close to natural look which they can enhance later. So although the difference isn't too drastic, quite similar, but the real differences come out when you get a bit more intricate. So in here, if you pay attention to the gray rocks, the 16 Pro has slightly better dynamic range. It lifts up the shadows, brings in more detail, has a bit of more superiority over the S24 Ultra. Now, there's one issue with the iPhone. See, in this case, not only does the S24 Ultra exposes more appropriately, the iPhone suffers from that same artifact issue that it does in low light photos. And that's a bit of a problem that almost all iPhones have. And this one has it too. But when you look at this video and see how nicely the iPhone 16 Pro Max captured the golden Hawaii sunset, it's just amazing. Samsung captured good footage, but it wasn't close to how it seemed at that time to my eye. Now, in super low light situation, mostly similar output, but then I dug out some footage in which I saw that the S24 Ultra was focus breathing more than the iPhone 16 Pro Max as I was walking. But then in another footage, the 16 Pro Max was breathing more than the S24 Ultra. In this footage, I also found the iPhone's footage to have the wrong white balance. The S24 Ultra caught the warm light correctly, and again, in here, you can see that not only is the footage more pleasing on the S24 Ultra, even the lights are handled better. The iPhone 16 Pro still suffers from these weird artifacts as soon as light tries to enter the lens. And all of this makes me feel that in low light situations, the S24 Ultra does better than the 16 Pro Max. But then there's action cam or steady mode, which you typically use when either you are shooting and yourself are moving at high speeds, or you're shooting someone else or something else that's moving at high speeds. And if you look at the footage again, you'll see that the 16 Pro Max is a little bit more jerky than the S24 Ultra. Then there's also portrait video, wherein the phones have to keep the subject in focus, blur out the background, and all in real time. And if you see, despite this being a very tough and complicated subject for portrait, the S24 Ultra is keeping more of the flower in focus than the 16 Pro Max. And lastly, check out these 4K selfie portrait videos that are shot using both the phones.
Alright, so guys, this is a portrait video that's shot using the iPhone 16 Pro. It records in 4K 30 FPS, and yeah, typically it's pretty good, and the edge detection should be really nice too. And this, guys, is a 4K portrait video shot using the Galaxy S24 Ultra. And again, this should look really nice as well, slightly more contrasty, which I personally prefer. But there's really interesting creative effects. For example, there's this glitch effect. There's a color point where everything else is black and white and I'm the one in color. And then there's big circle, which again, I can change the blur intensity on the fly, and you can see how simple it is, right? So just a couple of these tweaks that makes the portrait video on the S24 Ultra slightly more fun and interesting.
Now, in addition to all of these things, there are still a couple of software features that's there in the Galaxy S24 Ultra, which can be useful for quite a lot of people and video creators that's completely missing on the 16 Pro Max. For example, I think it's absolutely stupid that the iPhone still does not have this and the S24 Ultra does, is the ability to switch between the front and the back camera while recording a video. So let's say you're recording using the S24 Ultra using the back camera, and while in the same video, you can also switch to the front camera and continue that recording. And there's also a dual recording mode in which you can capture both from the front and the rear camera at the same time, something like a vlog. And as I said, this is something that's great, especially for content creators or vlog creators, and it's just completely missing on the iPhone. So, should I go with a blanket statement and say that the iPhones, or the 16 Pro Max in this case, is better for videos? Or should I take a more holistic approach and then say, looking at overall things, that low light videos, portrait videos, or the ability or flexibility to shoot with multiple cameras at once, and then say that the S24 Ultra is better for videos? And so I really think that there's a whole bunch of audience that's going to benefit from better daytime videos. And then there's another set of audience that's going to benefit from the versatility and the flexibility that the S24 Ultra offers. And so for videos, I'm just going to give 1 point to each of them. Now, I know 16 Pro Max has features like ProRes log video recording and audio mix that are missing on the S24 Ultra. But then the S24 Ultra has 200 megapixel mode or 8K video recording, or the Pro Video mode that gives you more manual control over shooting a video, which is again all missing on the iPhone. But I'm not considering these points for the sake of this video, just to keep it simple, and the fact that majority of users are not going to be using these features, they're rare use cases. But I'll say this, that if you're looking to create professional videos with a phone, then the 16 Pro or the Pro Max has better tools. But this video is targeted to casual phone users, and from that perspective, I think it's a win-win. So, finally, looking at the entire scoreboard, the S24 Ultra wins. And not because it's so much more better as a camera, but just how flexible the system is, given the controls, the zoom range, features, and functionalities. And I believe all of that gives the S24 Ultra an edge over the 16 Pro Max. Now, I didn't mention the camera capture button. That's honestly because I don't use it. I think it's more useless than the action button, which replaced the mute switch. It's slow and it just requires too much getting used to. But yeah, all of this makes me wonder that if the S24 Ultra is so good, how much better is the S25 Ultra going to be? And of course, we're going to be comparing that with the 16 Pro or the Pro Max. So if you do want to watch that video, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, hit that bell notification icon, and mark all so you get to know when that video is out. I'll see you guys in the next one.